Well, we'll just follow up on some of this. I had several pages of notes here, but Heather and David went through them quite quickly. So I'll speak to some of the subjects that we brought up here. All this is great theory. I appreciate what all of the other speakers have brought to this, and most of the time we're talking theory. I'd like to inject some reality into this. I'm going to submit that I'm probably the only one on the stage that's been waterboarded. I don't consider it torture, but by no means do I consider it pleasant, and it's not something you sign up to do, for your summer camp. The Air Force did it during our training to show us what it was like. The purpose of it was to show us the treatment that we could expect as potential prisoners of war. And the point was made, and I want to underscore this, never in our history have we gone into a conflict and our prisoners been treated right. The Geneva Convention was an attempt to make that happen. I submit that it has failed miserably. It restricts what we can do. We make sure we treat people right, and we get no reciprocal treatment at all. So it does not work. Now, John McCain will tell you that torture doesn't work and that he's against it because of his experiences in North Vietnam. No one can take away the fact that he was brutally treated, brutally tortured, and he has the gravitas to address this issue. But you have to understand that John McCain was the victim of torture for the infliction of pain. The Vietnamese were great at that. They could hurt you. They could make you say things that maybe you didn't want to say. For the most part, our prisoners did very well. They gave up what they thought their interrogators wanted to hear, which is the biggest threat you have when you resort to torture. Whoever you're torturing, the subject, is going to tell you what he thinks you want to hear. Just like a defector, we've seen how bad information leads to bad actions. Remember Curveball, the bad information about the Iraqi mobile labs. This is another instance where people tell you things they want to hear. Someone being tortured will tell you anything to stop the pain, to stop the treatment. Waterboarding, someone mentioned figure 60 to 90 seconds. I can tell you that after about 35 seconds, I was ready to tell them anything they wanted to hear, and I knew this was an exercise. And in the back of your mind, your instructors are telling you, project yourself into the situation. Imagine this to be real. I survived by telling myself, I know this is a game, and they're going to let me up before I drown. So there is that reflex, and waterboarding is so powerful that it will make you say something. So in the hands of skilled interrogators, can waterboarding work? Absolutely, but you have to know what you're doing. The North Vietnamese did not know what they were doing. They were great at inflicting pain, lousy at extracting effective, useful intelligence. Now, does it work? Well, you hate to say trust the government, but we have two government officials that say it worked. That would be the former Director of Central Intelligence, George Tenet, and the Director of the Bin Laden Unit, Alex Station, Dr. Mike Shore. You've seen him on television. He's making the rounds. I think he has a book out. So it can be effective if it's done properly. The question is not, can we do it? The question is, should we do it? And that's where we have to decide, is the tough interrogation of these suspects necessary? Do we want to go beyond whatever line that is? I can tell you the line that the government is trying to draw is the Army Field Manual. I've worked under the Army Field Manual. It's pretty restrictive. The new one is even more restrictive. They rewrote it in November of 2006. It's online. Type into Google Army Field Manual Interrogation. It's a voluminous document. It's written in typical Army bureaucratese. There's probably 4 pages in it worth reading. So, and those are the ones that tell you the 16 psychological approaches you can use, none of which will be effective against a terrorism suspect, because those techniques were written, just as someone said, to break a captured enemy soldier, one probably with no resistance training whatsoever. When we started taking large amounts of prisoners in Desert Storm, we had thousands, tens of thousands of Iraqi prisoners that we had to interrogate. We had to assess and determine if they were worth questioning. And once we determined if they were worth questioning, most of the time if you asked them a question, they gave you the answer. It was very surprising to us to learn that all these techniques really weren't necessary because the Iraqis had no training. Most of them were happy just to be away from Saddam Hussein. Very powerful tool. The ones that did not want to cooperate with us. Usually you found some major or lieutenant colonel in the Republican Guard that didn't want to talk to you. And that's when those techniques became somewhat effective. But there were always ones that would spit at you because they knew you couldn't hurt them. They knew the Americans followed the Geneva Conventions. They knew that you weren't going to hurt them. You couldn't touch them. Until some, and I won't use any personal references here, some lieutenant colonels I know, would throw them down to the ground, pull out a pistol, put it to their forehead, and say, "Tell me what I need to know," whatever the question was, "or I'm going to blow your brains out." That now will get you thrown out of the Army without your retirement. Back then, it was not common use, but it was pretty effective because it's real easy in theory to know that the Americans can't hurt you. But when the gun is on your forehead, you're not sure if this is the one American that didn't get the memo. So this can be effective. Now, I think we have to be somewhat reticent in applying these forms of interrogation. But I think we would be foolish, absolutely foolish, to outlaw them. I think the president was right to veto any bill that limits what the CIA can do. And this is only limiting the CIA. The entire Department of Defense is already constrained by the Army Field Manual. The idea is to extend that to the entire government. I think that's a mistake. We still have to have this tool in our arsenal because some people in the government who've done this for a living say that it works. George Tenet said it saved lives. I don't know that to be true. I don't know it to be not true. But I think we would be very foolish to take an arrow out of the quiver. And I do think this is an existential war. And I think it is a war that we're going to be fighting for a long time. I think we need to apply every weapon we have.